Since I have yet to find a complete guide on YouTube for how to make a utility box, I decided to make one. In this video, I'll not only be sharing my painting process, but I'll also be discussing exactly how to find these opportunities and what materials you need, as well as some tips and tricks that I've learned along the way. I'll also highlight some areas where I've refined my approach, giving you even more insight on how to make your next project even better. First, let me give you some context regarding this box. I was one of 12 artists selected this year to paint a box for the county, and you can find these artistic boxes scattered throughout Vegas. Mine is specifically located on the corner of Durango and Spring Mountain. If you're ever in the area, you can check out other painted boxes too, which I'll put that map in the description. It was even featured on the local news, which was a huge honor. I went with a desert meets ocean theme to promote that the actions that we take in our desert environment have an impact and effect on our ocean environments and vice versa. And did you know that Las Vegas was once in the ocean as well? It's also a reflection of my personal life, as I've spent the first half of my life next to the ocean living in San Francisco, and now I reside here in Las Vegas, the desert. It took me about 8 days from start to finish to complete this project. Feel free to skip ahead if you want to jump straight to the painting time lapse. Otherwise, keep watching, as I'll be going over some useful information on how to find opportunities like this, the submittal process, and the materials that I used. How to find opportunities. This is the question that I get asked most about this project, so let's dive into it first. I came across this opportunity through Clark County's Public Arts Instagram page, where they announced their ZAP project, looking for artists to paint the utility boxes in the project selected areas. To find them in your area, I recommend checking out the public art section of your local city, county, state, or government websites. Utility boxes, whether electrical, traffic control, or any other type, are usually owned by the municipal government, so they often manage these types of projects. So don't just go up and start painting one, as that would most likely be illegal. So please make sure that you obtain the necessary permissions before you start any public art project. The submittal phase. Let's say you found an opportunity and you are ready to submit. It's very important during this step to follow instructions very clearly for when you submit your documentation. Sometimes there are webinars offered related to the submission process, so if that is something that your government is offering for this type of project, please, I highly suggest attending them, as they are a great resource to be able to reach out to the project coordinators and as well as to ask some questions or gain more clarity on anything you might have. Once again, submissions can be disqualified if they don't follow instructions or if they lack clarity. So be sure to pay attention to all the details. Take clear photos of any relevant, previous relevant work, whether it be public arts or just to show that you're familiar with painting mediums. Gather a list of artistic accomplishments, involvement with the community, or anything of artistic relevance of that sort, because that will help your submission stand out from the rest. So when you submit, you might encounter two different types of requests. The first type is an RFP, which is request for proposals. So this type, you would need to submit your design along with the proposal. The second type is an RFQ, which is a request for a qualification. So for this, the selection is based on your qualifications, and then if you're chosen, you would submit a design afterwards. So fortunately, I do favor RFQs, which is the submission style for ZAP. So once I did get accepted, then I would move on and put together my design mockup. Design and approval phase. Once you made it to the design phase, usually the project coordinators will provide you with a design template, and if they don't, typically there are some pictures or dimensions of the box listed on the project website, so you can put together a mock-up yourself to make your own template. Personally, I prefer to use my iPad with Procreate for this step, as it allows me to quickly put together a design, and I can quickly make modifications later if needed. But whether you use digital or traditional methods, as long as you're able to present a clear and colored concept, either approach will work. Again, be sure to read the instructions very clearly, as utility boxes and other types of public art have certain design guidelines that have to be followed in order to maintain functionality. For example, something that I learned recently through reading the project guidelines is that utility boxes should have a minimal amount of dark colors. And this is because it gets very hot in Las Vegas and dark colors can cause the boxes to overheat. So just things like that to keep in mind the function of the project. And another thing that I learned is that the paint needs to be light fast, meaning paints that contain pigments that are resistant to UV damage and harsh weather, as this project is going to be outdoors and going to be in the weather and the elements. Light fastness also ensures that the colors will stay vibrant over time. This also means that you should avoid fluorescent or neon colors, as these tend to fade faster and they don't hold up as well under the sunlight. Fortunately, the spray paints that I wanted to use met this criteria, as well as the paints that were recommended from the county. I'll be going over them in a bit here, as well as other materials that I've prepared for this project. All right, just wanted to go over my supply list for painting a utility box. Here we have my main paints that I will be using. Nova color. I made sure that I got the opaque type of colors. These were recommended by the county, so I went ahead and got some. I've never used them before, but they are recommended by muralists and people who have worked in that realm. I've also brought my assortment of brushes and some of my backup paints in case I need to mix some colors with the Nova paints. I have some buckets for cleaning the paint off the brushes and, just changing out some dirty water. So here I have some glazing medium along with some painter's tape and some cheap craft paper. So what I plan to do for part of my project is to use some tape to make some clear lines. Now I've heard that it's better if you tape down and then you put glazing medium over it, let it dry, and once you paint over that medium, once you peel it off, it'll be a lot cleaner than just, not using that at all. So I'm gonna try that out. The craft paper for blocking out some areas, because I'll be using some spray paints, which I'll show in a minute. So here I have some Montana Black spray paints. I've used them once or twice before, and they're pretty good, pretty well recommended. Also some caps so I can do some different types of gradients. Okay, so this is the cleaner that I'll be using to clean the eco-friendly cleaner that I'll be using to clean the box. Respirator for the spray paints, popsicle sticks, scissors. I'm also gonna have to sand the box. I'll be using a fine grit sandpaper, but I just brought the whole kit with me. I'm also not pictured is a little dustpan and broom just to help clean the debris off the box before I start cleaning and sanding it. So once that's done, I'll be using some primer, water-based primer. I believe this is a white colored primer with a painting kit. So the roller I still have to get from Ace Hardware, as well as a paint key to open this up, and another paint tray. Bought some cheap trays from the dollar store to mix paints with. Shop towels, these are amazing. Some sponges for cleaning. A step ladder, because I will have to be reaching the top of the box. A wagon so I can transport stuff from my car, along with some plastic drop cloths, some masks so I can protect my face from sanding, some gloves, rags, sunblock. I know it's going to be kind of cold out, but still good to protect your skin. Trash bags, because you don't want to have to put some trash in your pocket or, the risk of having it fly away. Snacks, hand warmers, because I will be starting in the winter. An iPad with references, some headphones, and a spare battery to charge my phone or whatever devices. Some other stuff that has not been mentioned is the anti-graffiti kit, which will be provided by the County, so I'll be picking that up tomorrow. And a chair, and this is optional, but maybe like a hat, or I have an orange vest that I can wear just to help me stand out and to help me look a little bit more official. And that's about it. I wanted to dedicate this day to just cleaning and priming the box. I started off with sweeping and cleaning the surface of the box, getting rid of all the dust. I was originally going to use mineral spirits, but the instructions called for an eco-friendly cleaning solution. So I went with simple green, which I am so happy for because this stuff smells way better than mineral spirits and it's way less harsh. Not gonna lie, this part was pretty satisfying. Now I am going over with a sanding block just to get rid of the last bits of rough edges. I also had to tape over some of the handles and the stickers that were required for me to cover up so I didn't have to paint over them. Then after another wipe, it's time to prime. I was worried that the roller would leave too much texture, but it softened up as I dried. People started coming over and were excited to hear about my plans for what I had to paint. Okay, this was supposed to be my easy day, as my plan was to use 5 colors of spray paint to work on the sky and the ground. But I definitely got into my own head on this one. I also used just the right amount of spray paint for each color before running out. After I went home for lunch, I decided I was unhappy with what I had. So I went back to Blick Art Supplies to see if I could get some suggestions for other paints I can use to blend the colors more effectively. I had one suggestion that worked out alright and one that ended up not working out so well. Okay, I ended up running out to Blick because I was not happy with these gradients right here. And the sun is setting and it's only 3:40, so we're gonna try to fix this before the sun goes down. I expected blending spray paints on a wide surface to be a lot easier, but this was pretty difficult to get a smooth gradient with some of the colors. Maybe the Slimer green was throwing me off because the color was a lot lighter than what was advertised online. But I'll also admit that I lack a lot of experience with this medium too. I think I've always been intimidated by spray paints because you can't really mix colors if you want something different. You just have to get what you get. In hindsight, perhaps my results would have been better if I used paint rollers to blend my paints or even low pressure cans. I didn't really know what to do at this point, so I decided just to leave it alone just in case I was overthinking it. Especially since I have mountains and subject matters to paint over it, so that might influence how it looks. And if there are still any issues with the background, I would just fix them thereafter. Alright, day 3. Yesterday I was kind of freaking out over this gradient, but you know, after it dried and after giving it some thought, I think we can actually work with that. So today I'll be putting in the mountains and I'll be putting in like a cloudy haze over the background too, and we'll see how that goes. I started taping off the mountain base silhouette until I was out of tape. I ran out of tape. I had that much left. No, that's okay, because I still have to do the bottom, but I'm gonna paint the tops, put the little cloud haze on it, and then get some lunch, run to Home Depot, and come back. So I decided to start working on the transparent haze in the sky. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to thin out the white paint enough to make it look consistent. But after recuperating from dealing with unexpected results yesterday, I felt a lot more confident to think on my feet when things didn't go as planned. I believe it's important to have the ability to quickly pivot when working on large painting projects, especially with deadlines. What I did instead was give the haze a white background so I could paint over it later with similar colors to the background but lighter. I got some more tape during my lunch break and continued to mask off the mountain shape when I got back. I saw a tip that glazing medium will help prevent paint from bleeding under the tape and will help you get cleaner lines, so I decided to try that out. And as you can see, it did not disappoint at all. So I woke up at 6:30 to try to get some more daylight. I'm not really an early bird, but I'm not really a night owl either, so I don't know what creature I am. I started off the morning with painting over the top of the haze, trying to color match the base color as accurately as possible. Finding the right colors was a bit tricky, but after lunch, I decided that I should probably get to drawing in and masking out the mountain shadows, since it was going to be a long process. I got it down to a technique where I would draw in the shadows with a white chalk pencil, then put masking tape over it, then peeling off the masking tape and cutting the tape where the chalk line left an imprint. Not many people know this, but Las Vegas is a valley surrounded by beautiful mountain ranges everywhere you look. So fortunately for me, my references were easy to find. I was able to get half the box done before the sunset. This day ended up being all masking and taping, so lots of cutting and zoning out to podcasts. Overall, this was a 10-hour long process and used up about 2 whole rolls of tape. But once I was able to spray paint a gradient, it looked so clean. I was so happy with the results. However, I was expecting the tape peel to be a lot quicker and more satisfying, but even that took at least 30 to 45 minutes total to get everything off. Look at that, it looks so clean! 10 hours. It was so worth it. Hell yeah. It's Saturday, which means we got some help from the husband today. I had to mask out some of the mountain so I can reduce the patch in the sky that was bothering me. Then I outlined some plant silhouettes for him to fill in. I wanted to keep the background colors pretty simple so that the foreground subjects could stand out even more. While he was working on that, I finished filling in the white haze with the appropriate colors. It was a bit difficult to color match at first, but in the end I was happy with my results. Later, I painted in some thinner background wavy lines as another design accent. Then I positioned and outlined the creatures with chalk so I can have them filled in. Fortunately, the positioning was simple enough that I was able to freehand the placement. However, I am interested in how I would handle projects next time using a grid or a doodle grid. I wanted the animal silhouettes to be painted in white before going over them with their actual colors. From my experience with painting acrylic on canvas, color stands out more when they are painted on a white base. Especially since the background has a mix of shades, I wanted to make sure the creatures were opaque enough that the background didn't show through. In hindsight, I'm still not sure if this is a necessary step, since I would have just used the pinks or yellows. But I did have a lot of white, which was cheaper than the other colors, so in a way this did help me save cost on paint. Today was really exciting because I could feel the project all start to come together. I filled in the whale shark with white since that was the only one left that needed a base fill. Now I can start painting in the base colors of the creatures. I started off with 2 different shades of hot pink since that was the primary base color, then moved on to cadmium yellow since it was a secondary base color. The reason why I chose these colors is because I wanted to keep a warm palette for the foreground and a cool palette for the background to better create contrast. Once I was done filling in the base colors, I wanted to get started on the whale shark since it was the largest creature on the canvas, and I already had some of my pink colors mixed. At first, it was difficult to get the hang of blending acrylic colors over a large space, but I was able to work through it with more color mixing in between shades and even using just a little bit of water to thin out the paint. And I mean just a little bit, since generally you don't want to thin out acrylics too much with water since it weakens the pigment concentration. I loved working on the whale shark. He's so cute. I mean, just look at that smile. I managed to get him done today and even got started on the eagle ray. This is it, the final day. I was determined to stay out here as long as I needed to finish the project. I started off with the turtle since I knew this one was going to be the most challenging. And turtles have lots of little patches and wrinkles and spots. But this one turned out to be a lot of fun as well. I really liked the oranges I was introducing to the palette. It gave the composition a lot more pop. I think that combined with the magenta really made everything start to stand out. Once I was finished with a turtle, I went ahead and applied the same color palette treatment to the eagle ray with all the yellows and oranges I just mixed. Alright, now just the jellyfish left, along with a few other finishing touches. It was already starting to get dark at 3:30, so I was hoping to have enough warmth and light to effectively finish my painting today. Yes, you heard that right, 3:30. That's what I get for painting on one of the shortest days of the year. I gave the jellyfish a transparent base by lightly thinning the paint and then going over it with darker and more opaque paints, finishing off with yellow accents. I believe it was around 6 p.m. now, but it was so cold. I was starting to get worried because my fingers were too cold to even bend at the joints effectively and hold the brush. I had some hand warmers that were pressed up against my hands with rubber bands, but they only did so much. The crazy thing is that it was only about 50 degrees outside Fahrenheit, but in the desert, the heat and the cold tend to be exaggerated because of the rapid temperature shifts that happen from day to night. I was so close to finishing at this point, but I knew I couldn't be out here for much longer. Thankfully, the basketball courts next to me provided really good lighting and I was in a safe public area. Alright, just the fish silhouettes now. I had to go over these with 2 to 3 coats since I didn't give them a white base, but it was fine since it was such a small area. And finally, signing the piece and it's done. Such a surreal feeling. I went back home ready to take a nice warm bath and enjoy the holidays. Oh. I technically didn't count this day since I already finished the painting and all I had to do was apply the anti-graffiti coat, which was graciously supplied by the county. I waited a couple days to apply this since I wanted to enjoy Christmas Eve and day at home, which thankfully I did because Christmas Eve was really windy and that would have been unpleasant for working outside. I started off by wiping down the painting with a damp shop towel to remove any remaining chalk lines and dirt that may have accumulated during the windstorm. I was a little nervous to apply this since I was told that if the application is too thick, it can start to bubble and I didn't want all my hard work to be ruined. So I bought a cheap sprayer from Home Depot since it was one of the recommended methods of application. Unfortunately, the sprayer wasn't as fine as I hoped and I forgot my brush at home to smooth it out. Luckily, my shop towel seemed just as efficient to thinly and evenly distribute the coating. Next time, I would probably use an ultra smooth foam paint roller to apply the coating. I gave it 3 coats in total, waiting at least an hour in between each coat for it to fully dry. I even got to eat delicious curry and taiyaki at the food hall across the street while I waited. Alright, now I want to reflect on what I thought went well during this project, as well as what I thought could be improved. Taking time for these retrospective sessions after each piece is crucial. It's how I spot areas for growth and improvement in future projects. First off, I was so happy that Nova Color paints were recommended for this project. It was my first time hearing about this brand, and I tend to be skeptical when I first start out with spending a fair amount of money on new brands, but I fell in love with it immediately. The application was so smooth, the colors were so vibrant, and I was surprised with how opaque it was for the thin amount of application I was using. Definitely will be using them again. In fact, I already have another order on the way. Next, I feel like I planned my materials quite well, especially for my first time. What really came in clutch were these dollar store takeout containers to hold and mix my paint. These were cheap, sturdy, disposable, and they even came with these lids that I can label them and store them for the next day. I also decided to use shop towels instead of regular paper towels, and they worked out so well. They're super absorbent, they're durable, which means I was able to reuse them multiple times before having to throw them away. Another thing I found useful was a step stool. Initially, I had brought the step stool out so I can reach the top parts of the utility box. However, I found that it came much more in handy when I was using it to keep my materials at waist height. So that way I didn't have to bend down as much to pick up my materials, which saved a lot of energy. And that is something I didn't even consider. I'm sure there are better options I can use out there for the future, but now I know that prioritizing these methods to work in a way that conserves my energy and posture, saves me from future back pain, is an important consideration when working on large-scale projects. All right, the glazing medium and the Scotch 4090 tape combo, the painter's tape that I use, turned out so crispy. The one thing I would do differently is use a matte medium because I was using something a little bit more glossy. And the gloss did stand out just a little bit, but it's hardly noticeable. But overall, it looked pretty good. As for my concept, oftentimes I've had finalized projects not quite line up with the sketch or the concept that I put together. So most of this is due to like digital colors not really matching what outputs traditionally, or placements being a little bit different. However, I feel like this time around, the concept matched pretty close to the final piece. A big part of what actually helped was color matching from the pigments that were listed directly on the website. Again, it's not really an exact replica, as these are digital recreations of the traditional pigment, but it helped me get pretty close. I also noticed that I was able to focus on this project more than, if not all projects I've ever had in my life. Like, I didn't feel anxious about the next thing so much, or wanted to go on my phone to distract myself, or had the urge to Google something every 5 minutes like I tend to have at home. But I was just in this flow state, and I was just happy with what I was doing at the moment. And I don't know if that's because I was working in a new environment or because I was just so excited about what I was doing, but I was just in a very good spot when I was working on this project. And that right there is a magical place to be. That's where you want to be. And that feeling is how I knew that this is what I wanted to do more of in my career. And not only was I able to stay happy and focused, but I learned so much. I definitely learned a lot from improving on techniques as I went. But I also had the county to help me out and gave me an opportunity to reach out to the project coordinators whenever I needed some advice or some help on anything. So that really helped me out a lot. All right, what can be improved? Okay, the tough part. Honestly, pointing out my mistakes makes me feel a little bit vulnerable, especially since some of them seem so obvious, but it's okay. Like I mentioned before, it is so important to talk about these things, and I'd much rather tell you guys now so you and I can prevent making these mistakes again in the future. The main thing I feel like I could have improved upon was my time management. I finished the whole project in 8 days, technically 9, but my goal was to complete it in 7. On average, this is about how much time it takes for a muralist to complete a project of this size. I do think that given my experience, 8 to 9 days was not bad at all. And thankfully, Clark County gave us 5 weeks to finish the project, so that was very generous of them. Especially with the short winter days and not getting enough sunlight. I mean, you saw how it started to get dark at 3:30. The main thing that could have saved me some time was probably not spending 10 hours on masking and taping the mountains. So on canvases, I typically paint the background in full, so that when I start painting the foreground elements, the flow of the background will continue behind it. However, I think that in this case, I could have saved some hours and tape by outlining the placement of the plants and creatures first. So that way I would have more of a general idea of areas where I wouldn't need to apply a mask. I was also unsure of how long I needed to wait for my primer and spray painted background to dry before applying some more paint, which is why I did the primer on day 1 and the spray painted background on day 2. I wanted to stay on the safe side, but if I could get away with not waiting as long for both of those things to dry, I would have been able to cut my time back by about a day. Second was my supply management. As I mentioned earlier, I felt that overall I did a pretty good job preparing materials. However, when it came to paints, I definitely overestimated how much Novacolor acrylic paint I needed and underestimated how much spray paints I needed. I think I ran to Blick Art Supplies like 3 times that week just to restock on spray paints, and I'm pretty sure the employees were tired of seeing me. But thankfully, I was working locally. But I do want to train myself for if I end up working on projects out of town, where I wouldn't be able to restock on supplies if I ran out. Now that I know I have a better idea of how much area a can of spray paint takes up, I have a much better estimate of what I would need to buy for next time. I'm also interested in exploring some more low pressure brands like Montana Gold or Montana 94, just to see how they work. Either way, I'm in the process of setting up a panel in my garage, so I have a canvas to experiment with and see which mediums I like more and just familiarize myself with the spray painting medium. Another option that artists use for backgrounds and large areas are the bare latex exterior paints, which are typically found in hardware stores, and these can be applied with like a small roller brush. Just to fill in some larger areas, which I could have probably used on like the mountain and the ground. Another thing to take into consideration was mixing different paint types and brands. Since I was new to using Novacolor, I figured I would just start off with buying a few colors, and then whatever color that I needed to mix in there that I didn't have, I would use my acrylic paints that I had on stock, which happened to be golden heavy body acrylics. So these paints are lovely, however, and they did come in clutch for when I did need to mix colors, like the haze that I painted in the background and parts of the whale. However, not as well as I hoped. So the thing is about heavy body paints is that they are very thick. They're like a paste, basically. So they're not very ideal over painting over large surfaces. Unlike Novacolor, which is very smooth and fluid. So it ended up being like the more I would mix in these golden colors, the thicker the paint would be, and it started to get a little bit difficult. So I decided like it's just best to stick with one brand and do a little bit more planning from there. Something I might try next time is to pre-mix the colors that I might need in advance, so that way I don't have to worry about it too much when I do reach the site. All right, now for brushes. For the most part, I did enjoy using the flat brushes that I had in my set, but for larger surfaces, I brought in some foam brushes at the last minute, and I really enjoyed them because they had a very smooth and even application. Problem is they are a little bit difficult to clean on site, and because they're so cheap, they do fall apart at the end of the day. I know that there's some larger brushes out there that muralists tend to use, but I was hesitant on trying to buy them because I haven't had much luck with them. I've even bought some more expensive higher end brushes, but I've had them fall apart on me or had them shed hair or leave some streaky textures. But I do think that trying to find some bigger brushes and seeing how it applies paint is definitely worth looking into for next time to save a lot of time and money. I've also seen some muralists use like 2 4-inch foam rollers, so that might be worth exploring. All right, these next few things are fairly minor, but I still want to address them as they're worth improving. So protecting myself from the elements. I was pretty lucky, all things considered, that the weather was really good for painting outdoors, especially in Las Vegas. You know, it was during winter time, there wasn't a lot of wind, and it wasn't too hot or too cold, unless it was towards the end, it was a bit cold. But fortunately, I was wearing sunscreen for the most part, but I think there were definitely times where the sun was a little bit harsh, and I think next time I do want to pack like a beach umbrella to help protect myself from harmful UV rays as I'm working. But yeah, it was, like I said, it was the cold later on during that night that really hindered my ability to work, especially towards the end. Definitely needed to bring more layers with me. However, I'm still on the lookout for how to keep my hands warm and while still being able to hold a paintbrush. Definitely let me know if you have a solution for that. Another minor thing is to avoid tangents in my composition. When it comes to art composition, a tangent is when two lines in a painting touch in a way that causes spatial ambiguity. Again, not really a huge deal, but this can easily be avoided by placing design elements in a way that make them seem more independent of each other. So before I wrap this up, I just want to mention how this opportunity ended up being a huge milestone in my art career. I've been wanting to get into making murals for years, but I've never had work examples or the experience to even know where to begin. Now that I have that, it's all that I want to do moving forward. I already have concepts planned for walls in my home, other public art opportunities, and even international opportunities. Well, that's all that I have for you today. But I really do hope this video gave you some insight in what goes into these types of projects. If you still have any questions or want to share some tips of your own, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, let's learn together. Take care, and I can't wait to see what you make next.